Beneath the topsoil of the Amazon basin lies a dark, fertile secret known as terra preta, a man-made earth that has sustained dense populations for thousands of years where normal tropical soils wash out in a single season. This deep black earth was not created by modern chemical applications or heavy machinery, but by the deliberate, slow smoldering of agricultural waste beneath a blanket of soil. For the backyard homesteader working with a tight budget in the clay hills of Georgia or the rocky ground of New England, this ancient technique offers a path to permanent soil fertility without a single trip to the garden center. The secret is biochar, a pure form of crystalline carbon created through pyrolysis, which is the heating of organic material in the total absence of oxygen. When wood is burned in an open campfire, it turns to white ash, leaving behind a few minerals but releasing all its carbon into the atmosphere. When that same wood is baked inside a sealed earth kiln, the volatile gases escape and burn off, leaving behind a porous, black sponge that never decays in the dirt. This carbon skeleton acts as a permanent coral reef for the soil, providing billions of microscopic chambers that hold water, shelter beneficial microbes, and lock on to dissolved nutrients that would otherwise wash away in the next spring rain. Building a traditional earth kiln requires nothing more than a shovel, a piece of scrap sheet metal, a match, and the fallen tree branches that already litter the back corner of your property. To understand why this crude black material is so revolutionary, you have to look closely at the physical structure of a single piece of charcoal. Under a microscope, a fragment of biochar looks like a complex honeycomb of empty plant cells, a vast network of tiny caverns that creates an incredible amount of surface area. A single ounce of high-quality biochar can have a surface area equivalent to several football fields, all of it buried right beneath your tomato plants. This massive internal space acts as a physical sponge for moisture, holding up to 3 times its weight in water, which keeps the root zone damp during a dry spell in late July. More importantly, the surfaces of these carbon chambers carry a negative electrical charge, which naturally attracts and holds positively charged nutrient ions like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. In an ordinary garden bed, heavy rains wash these vital minerals down past the root zone into the subsoil, a wasteful process called leaching that leaves your crops starved and pale. Biochar stops this cycle completely by catching those nutrients like a net, holding them loosely enough for plant roots to drink them in whenever they need a boost. Because biochar is pure carbon, it does not rot, compress, or disappear over time. Once you add it to your soil, it stays there, improving your harvest year after year for the rest of your life. The process of making this soil amendment begins with selecting the right feedstock, which is the raw wood you will pack into your kiln. Look for cured, dry branches between 1 and 3 inches in diameter, the kind of brush that accumulates after a windy thunderstorm or a weekend spent pruning the apple orchard. Wet green wood contains too much moisture, which wastes valuable thermal energy as it turns to steam and slows down the entire charring process. Avoid any wood that has been chemically treated, painted, or pressured logged for outdoor construction, as these materials release toxic copper, chromium, and arsenic into the air and into your finished garden beds. Oak, hickory, and maple produce a dense, long-lasting biochar with smaller pores that excel at holding nutrients, while pine, cedar, and other softwoods create a lighter char that absorbs water very quickly. Gather your wood and cut it into uniform lengths of about 2 feet so that it packs tightly into the pit without leaving large, empty air pockets that could ruin the burn. Packing the kiln tightly is critical because any large gaps of trapped air will allow oxygen to circulate, causing your valuable wood to burn down to useless gray ash instead of baking into solid black carbon. Choosing the right location for your earth kiln is the next critical step in ensuring a safe, efficient burn that yields high-quality biochar. Find a level patch of ground at least 20 feet away from your home, barns, overhanging tree branches, or wooden fence lines to prevent any stray sparks from catching. The soil should be easy to dig, ideally a firm clay or loam that will hold its shape when you carve out the trench, rather than a loose, shifting sand that collapses into the hole. Check the wind direction on the morning of your burn, ensuring that any light breeze will carry the thin wisp of smoke away from your house and away from the neighbor's yard. Keep a 5-gallon bucket of water or a garden hose close at hand throughout the day. Not because the fire will get out of control, but because water is the exact tool you will use to stop the process at the perfect moment. Mark out a rectangle on the ground measuring 4 feet long by 2 feet wide, using a sharp spade to cut through the grass and lay the foundation for your low-cost thermal processor. Digging the pit is where the physical work of soil building truly begins, requiring a sturdy trenching shovel and a bit of muscle. Dig the trench to a depth of precisely 18 inches, keeping the sidewall straight and vertical so the structure does not cave in during the intense heat of the burn. As you shovel the dirt out of the pit, pile it neatly along the edges of the trench, as this excavated soil will be used later to seal the kiln and choke out the oxygen. The bottom of the pit should be flat and smooth, cleared of any large rocks or thick roots that could interfere with the tight packing of your firewood. This underground chamber naturally insulates the fire, trapping the intense heat inside the woodpile while protecting the burning zone from the cooling effects of shifting surface winds. By utilizing the earth itself as the kiln wall, you eliminate the need for expensive steel barrels or high-tech retorts, relying instead on the ancient, reliable thermal mass of the ground beneath your feet. With the pit prepared, you can now assemble System 1, which is the primary fuel bed designed to initiate the high-temperature pyrolysis reaction. Place a layer of dry, thin kindling, like small twigs, dry pine cones, and crumpled newspaper, along the very bottom of the trench to act as your starter fluid. On top of this kindling, begin stacking your cut logs in tightly packed layers, crisscrossing them like a game of Lincoln logs to ensure structural stability as the pile settles. Place the thickest oak and hickory branches in the middle of the stack, where the heat will be most intense, and save the thinner branches for the outer edges. Pack the wood all the way up to the top lip of the trench, pressing the pieces down firmly to minimize the internal air spaces and create a solid block of fuel. This tight arrangement forces the fire to burn from the top down, a clever engineering trick that creates a clean, virtually smokeless burn by forcing the rising volatile gases to pass through the hot flame zone above them. System 2 is the air control and sealing mechanism, which allows you to transition the pit from an open fire into a sealed, oxygen-deprived baking chamber. For this system, you will need a single sheet of scrap corrugated roofing metal or thick steel plate cut slightly larger than the opening of your trench, measuring roughly 5 feet long by 3 feet wide. This metal lid will act as a physical barrier, stopping fresh oxygen from rushing into the pit while allowing you to control the exhaust of the wood gases. Keep a metal rake or a long green branch nearby so you can safely adjust the position of the plate once it becomes hot to the touch. You will also use the pile of excavated soil dug from the trench to pack around the edges of the metal sheet, creating an airtight mud seal that locks the heat inside. This simple combination of scrap metal and damp earth gives you total control over the atmosphere inside the kiln, allowing you to starve the fire of oxygen at the precise second the wood turns to char. Lighting the kiln requires a careful hand and a watchful eye as the initial flames take hold of the kindling at the bottom of the trench. Strike a long match and drop it into the kindling layer, watching as the tiny sparks catch the dry pine cones and paper, sending a thin plume of gray smoke into the morning air. Within 10 minutes, the fire will climb up through the tightly packed layers of wood, the heat intensifying until the logs begin to crackle and pop. At this stage, the process relies on open combustion to build up a massive bed of glowing red coals, creating the intense thermal energy needed to drive out the moisture trapped deep within the thickest hardwood branches. As the wood burns, the outer layers will turn bright white with ash, a visual sign that the volatile compounds, the natural tars, resins, and sugars inside the plant cells, are beginning to vaporize. You must let the fire burn openly until the entire top layer of the wood stack has collapsed into a uniform, glowing bed of deep red and orange coals, with no yellow flames visible. This transformation indicates that the water has been completely driven off, and the wood is ready to be converted from a raw fuel into stable, permanent carbon. As soon as the yellow flames die down and the glowing coals reach the top lip of the trench, it is time to deploy System 3, which is the oxygen starvation phase that seals the kiln. Slide the sheet of corrugated roofing metal carefully over the top of the trench, ensuring it covers the entire opening and rests flat against the surrounding soil. Immediately grab your shovel and begin throwing the excavated dirt around the perimeter of the metal sheet, packing it down tightly against the edges to choke off any gaps where fresh air could leak inside. As the soil meets the hot metal, any remaining moisture in the dirt will hiss and turn to steam, helping to create a tight, airtight mud seal around the entire perimeter. Inside the dark subterranean chamber, the temperature will quickly climb above 900 degrees Fahrenheit. But without fresh oxygen, the wood cannot burn to ash. Instead, the intense heat bakes the logs from the inside out, forcing the remaining volatile gases to cook out of the wood cells while leaving the tough carbon skeleton completely intact. This high heat baking process must be left undisturbed for at least 4 hours, allowing the thermal mass of the surrounding earth to maintain the high temperatures needed for complete pyrolysis. During this time, you can stand back and watch the sealed earth, looking for any thin wisps of smoke escaping through cracks in the dirt seal, which should be quickly patched with another shovel of damp soil. Inside the pit, a beautiful chemical transformation is occurring. The complex chains of cellulose and lignin are breaking apart, releasing hydrogen and oxygen gases, while the carbon atoms realign themselves into stable, six-sided rings. This molecular structure is incredibly durable, virtually identical to the structure of graphite, which is why soil microbes and fungi cannot break it down or digest it like they do with ordinary compost or leaves. While a pile of wood chips will rot and disappear from your garden within 2 years, this baked carbon skeleton will remain in your soil for centuries, a permanent addition to your homestead's infrastructure. Once the 4 hours have passed and the ground has begun to cool, you must prepare for the critical step of quenching the char to stop the reaction and stabilize the carbon. Use your shovel to carefully scrape away the dirt seal from one end of the metal plate, using caution as the escaping air will immediately cause the hot gases inside to ignite into brief, bright flames. Slide the metal cover back just a few inches, exposing the glowing black logs beneath, and immediately dump a 5-gallon bucket of cold well water directly into the opening. A loud, violent hiss will erupt from the trench as a thick cloud of white steam rushes into the air, carrying away the last of the intense heat and rapidly cooling the charred wood. Continue sliding the plate back and adding water bucket by bucket until the entire pit is thoroughly soaked, drowning every remaining ember to ensure the char does not reignite once exposed to the open air. This rapid cooling also causes the hot carbon to fracture and crack on a microscopic scale, opening up even more surface area and creating the perfect porous texture for soil application. Shovel the wet, cooled biochar out of the pit and pile it onto a clean piece of plywood or a tarp next to the trench, where you can inspect the quality of your labor. The finished material should be lightweight, deep black from the outer bark to the very center of the wood, and it should metallically clink like broken glass when you drop a piece onto the pile. If you try to squeeze a piece between your fingers, it should crumble easily into a fine, granular powder with no smell of smoke or wet wood remaining. If the pieces are brown or tough to break, the kiln did not reach a high enough temperature or was uncovered too soon, meaning some of the raw wood resins are still trapped inside the pores. This raw, uncharged char cannot be put directly into your garden beds because its empty, highly reactive pores will immediately suck up all the available nitrogen and water from the surrounding dirt, starving your crops and stunting their growth for the first season. To make this raw carbon useful, you must first activate or charge it, a process that fills the empty microscopic caverns with a rich blend of nutrients and beneficial biology before it ever touches your garden crops. The easiest way to charge your biochar is to blend it directly into your active backyard compost pile at a ratio of about 1 part char to 4 parts green and brown organic matter. As the compost breaks down, the nutrient-rich liquids, nitrogen compounds, and billions of beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi will migrate into the open chambers of the charcoal, packing them full of life. Leave the mixture to cure for at least 2 weeks, keeping it moist and turning it occasionally with a pitchfork to ensure every single grain of carbon is completely saturated with the biological life of the compost. Once charged, this black gold can be spread across your vegetable beds at a depth of half an inch and tilled or raked into the top 6 inches of your topsoil, right where the young roots can access it. The long-term impact of this single zero-cost project on your homestead's independence cannot be overstated. By taking the fallen branches from your woods and processing them in a simple earth trench, you are effectively stopping the natural cycle of decay and locking carbon into your property's soil for generations. In the heavy clay of the South, this biochar will loosen the tight soil structure, allowing plant roots to breathe and preventing the ground from baking into a hard, cracked brick during the August heat waves. In the sandy soils of the coastal plains or the high deserts, it will act as a permanent reservoir, catching every drop of rain and holding it right in the root zone so your crops can survive long droughts without constant watering. You will find yourself relying less and less on store-bought bags of fertilizer, plastic jugs of liquid nutrients, and expensive soil conditioners, saving your hard-earned money while building true resilience right beneath your boots. True sovereignty on the land is not bought from a catalog or delivered in a cardboard box. It is dug out of the earth with a simple iron shovel, forged in the intense heat of a backyard kiln, and buried deep within the soil to feed your family for a lifetime.